사지 선바정 선바지 지들로 두서와 타버드비 랑자를 텔로 보이제 동불로 타버드로 제부 터지비 터지 터지비 터들라 동해도 근육은 선바도 연락 중에 선바니지 동해도 근육은 선바들 두대 그님이 네 두대 대지 토마스 그거바다 동해 공부하니 동해 공부들 동해 안에 동해 지 조송 어떤 사지 말이야 되는 근육 근육에 상관들라 송 말이야 너무 같이 술래서 비수 치보가 저war내비수 yeah.
Once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section that deals with training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So when we look at the outline of that section, we divide it into 4 parts. First we have the actual mental training, and then the second category is the measure of the determination to be free, or the measure of one's renunciation. The third category is dispelling misconceptions, and then a fourth category which is ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So those are the 4 categories that are dealt with in that section on training the mind, the stage of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And when we begin by looking at the first category, which is the mental training. So the mental training is divided into 2 categories. First, identifying the mind intent on liberation, or identifying renunciation, the mind which has renunciation, or the mind which definitely wishes to emerge. That's the literal word. If you look at the Tibetan Nejung, it's definitely emerge, a mind that wants to emerge. So first is identifying that mind, and then the second category is the method for developing that mind intent on liberation. So once you get through the first category and identify that mind, then you get into method. And that section on method then is broken down into 2 different parts. First, reflection on suffering and its origin, and then a second category which is a reflection from the viewpoint of the 12 links of dependent origination. So the first category, reflection on suffering and its origin, begins with another breakdown, which is first the reflection on suffering, and that is divided into 2 categories: reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and then a second category of reflection on cyclic existence in terms of origin, or the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin. So the first category, reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, there are 2 categories that are under that. The first category is showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first among the 4 Noble Truths, showing that that's the order, with the truth of suffering being first. And then a second category, which is the actual meditation on suffering. So once we get through that, once you've shown the significance of that first noble truth being the truth of suffering, then we go to that next category, the actual meditation on suffering. And in that we find reflection on the 8 types of suffering, reflection on the 6 types of suffering, reflection on the 3 types of suffering, and so forth. So then once we get through that section, then we get into the actual reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin, and then that section then is broken down into 3 categories, and that's where we currently are. And those categories are how the afflictions arise, second category, how you thereby accumulate karma, and then the third category, which is how you die and are reborn. So those are the 3 categories we'll be dealing with. and I will tell you the page number in one moment. I believe it's around 300. Yeah. 296.
Your mic keeps going in and out.
Then Ngatsu Gari Kaba Gutsu. Okay, Somba. Okay, so we're going to start on page 307. We're going to start with how you die and are reborn. So Nicha Jechu Chi. Somba Chipo. Okay. All right.
That's what Chipo Sajinga dig the Wajir Messe Marba, Sajinga, Nizanju Chula Nga, Chi Jens Tambo Marba, Chi Jen, Chi Sen, Drakon Dubason, Sonje, Shene Padruzu, Jeje, Tene, Jisi to Nizanju Jesus, what the thing but not the thing but what? Yeah.
So on page 307 you'll see under the major heading, How You Die and Are Reborn, Lama Tsongkhapa has divided that section into 5 different parts. First, the causes of death. Second, the mind at death. Third, where heat gathers. Fourth, how you reach the intermediate state after death, or how you reach the bardo after death. And then 5, how you then take rebirth. Dixon.
What Tombo Chi Jens Roa, Tombo Chi Jens Marbe, Tombo Ne, and the Shivatala, Tsesebi Shivajuaris, Suzu Lodinga Juena, Luja Yuena, Nishu Yuena, Sonju Yuena, Karuyana, Zune, Duyan to Zune Shivatala, Tsesebi Chwas, Tsesebi Chawane. Maji leji jita pombi tse tangi se ne chewa tabo dula bobi chewas ne kuru cheshaya ka dula bobo res yote tambo tse ta yang suna se ne chena kenji yuwa res gawa meba jini chena kenji yuwa jiro ta suna se ne chewa ne yuji me ne chewa tabo os Anji saya tangla suwa tusu me ne shina kien tabu tawa de yuji me ne chewa suno se ne chewa suwa tingi bari ta ya nga mabubi chewa tala tsi ma zeba chi jen gunduli sunga ale tangbo wate tama tu chi juyu sha na jen gud shugu juyu mara
so then tambo de lo ni
Tombo Tsesebi Chewarwa. Ta Shivatala Tsesebi Chewa, Suna Sebi Chewa, Yanga Mabubi Chewa Marbe. Tombo Tsesebi Chewadra. Tsesebi Chewa Dal Lo Nishu Sonju Jakazi Yovaina, Tse Dune, Shivatala Tsesebi Chewa Marbe. Ta Suna Sebi Chewa de Tujemen Shenakentla. Suna Sebi Chewas. Ta Yanga Mabu Chewa de Ta Chi Jen Gondula Sungdua, what the Sumba Dredua. What that Tomini Chijana.
So the causes of death. So death from exhaustion of your lifespan means dying after you have used up all the lifespan that was projected by your previous karma. As the time has come, you die. So this is the first among these causes of death. And it doesn't matter what age you're at. If you've lived 20 years, or you've lived 30 years, or you've lived 100 years, when the time comes that your previous life's karma that is projecting this current basis loses its potency loses up its potency, then at that time you die. So it doesn't matter at what age you are. It just matters whether it depends on the potency of the karma that is allowing one to be alive. So here it says, after you have used up all the lifespan that was projected by your previous karma. So the previous karma projecting this current life, and once the potency for that projection is no longer there, then one dies. So that's the exhaustion of the potential for that arisal is number one. And then number two says death from exhaustion of merit means, for example, dying deprived of the necessities of life. So dying because you don't have things that you must, or things that are needed, such as food, or dying because you don't have any water or anything to drink. So this is a second cause of death. And then number three, it says there is also death from failure to avoid danger, in regard to which the sutras list 9 causes and conditions for premature death. So Rinpoche said, explain the first 2 and read the third, and then he'll now explain number 3.
Chi jen gondole sombares, chi jen, and Shag jen go ndole sombares, chi jen go ndole sombe, jen good shows and Tom de Redua Kaze and Kaze Tsu Mazimba Sawa dance, and the Kalasa Tsu Mazimba, Mobuseba, you know what they gave, Chi jen shigares, Shag Jushigares, Tombuche. Niba Matroba Sawa. Matroba Sawa, I do what they and two number the Sasuna, Zuban Marbe, Matroba Sawas, Nibaje, Sumba de Kamajoa Sawas, Kalaji Sasadule, Kalat Majuba Jasena, Yantegi Jenshene, Shag Jushi Guejera, Kamajoa Sawas, Tene Majua. What the Kazir Jibarba? Kazu Matroba Sawa, Chumazimba Sawa, Matroba Sawa, Kamajua Sawa, Jije, Majua, Nabatimata, Majua, Tua Saba, Jimba Majibatas, Kala Majuba de Tugun Sadwaina, and the Kushulu Mamaduna, or the Jenshenia, Shag Jushi Gujarova.
Don't the Shuja.
And the Shuja in the Berepas and Chio Marota, Shuja Sa, and the Kalatuma Majubache, Tual Saduena, Teshuluma Majibache, Mama Dubache, Debaina, what they change in a share Jushigres.
Then the Kalasa, Dene, Gare.
Tua Saba Serva, Kala Maju, Tua Saba, Drugunos Dene. And what Mama Rubache, and what the Shulum Madonna,
oh,
the change of this.
Okay, self will do. Okay, Gongel Mebachi.
Nabache,
the Jiba.
Jiba, Tam Hibangabasa, Tanga to Subanga to the Rim, what is the cheese and the door. Tochi Juno Jovaje, and what the Chabchan Suba Mama Bobate, what the suggestion, Chechen Shigudo, Mibangaba dance.
The Jipa the Mapa Chapagare did the jar.
Tatama de what the Majuba Tua Saba, Shilumanina, Shiluma Matuna, Chechen Shigres, Jiba Terba. Tam Hibangabasana, Druno Lula, what the to see should have no Ludena.
Okay.
What they change is.
Okay.
Oh, the red was
trouble do.
Then the man so Madame Batans. That man was Shukis, I don't go to some hanging a law, and then Susu said women.
Okay.
Hanging a young do send out to China Mandra. Pan Susu Madame Batans, pen kanga dun seba ina do cha go jirwa wo de jin she de pen su su ma de ba ji pen kanga nyong du se na de jin she ne she ga ju she ge de ane gongba da ma she gongba da ma gongba ma she ba da gongba da ma gongba ma she kala gongba da ma gongba ma she ba sa sa zu na ane wo de chi jin she go jirwa ta Kala Kumba Dama Gumbas, and then Kala to Su Dujin Sadia Juro. Dujin Sadia Kumba Marbe, Dujin Sadia to Su Kumbaro, Jud Saguro, Kumba. Magumba Sana, Neshi Mazabaya, Kala than Yungurota. Magumba, Meshiba, and then Kumba Magumba, Meshiba, Kala than Sasuna. Chi Geshe Guerwa. Gomba Sena, Judana, whatever Satan land, Jud Sadro. Jud Sadro Combarota. Comba Sagurota.
Okay.
And then Kala to Nema Mazabaja, Saba Sabina, Magumba Seba Marve. Magumba, Magumba, Mashiba, Sasuna, Chi Chen.
Okay.
Then, do my imandroa, do my imandroa. Tangazo what the Shulubandua, the letter, what the Nimingan, the Nedrogi in the 2 inches. Chenmo, what the Nege Nyaka, then do the 2 my imandroas. Do my imandroa, what then Rogina, and the Yansa Kalandroa. Masaya was at the Vanduna, and Saya Nyakayo. What is it? Nyakayo Marwata?
Masaya, Sayon.
Ball. Yansaka, young Yosat Banduna on the Zindu.
Oh,
what in Yaka? Do my Imandua, what the Sujandua?
Okay.
Yansa dance. Then the Mazamba Shubas, there, what the get cheese change she was with her.
That's so.
Till Nalu change it again, Nalula Gambula Mazama about what the cheese is, what the Tuba Jaja, Pasuchu Jason. Pasuchu Jason, what the Mazama Shuba said, Gambula Mazama Shuba,
Gambos.
Jamie give all.
Okay,
Jamie all the Mazama Shusuna, put my chick,
Less,
what the cheese change is.
Okay.
What the good what the
Okay. So we have these causes of death that are presented here. I'll count them after. And it says death from exhaustion of your lifespan is the first one. Death from exhaustion of your merit is the second. Now we've arrived at death from failure to avoid danger, in regard to which the sutras list 9 causes and conditions for premature death. So first is overeating. So this is just eating and eating and eating to the point where you die. So this is the first cause of death. Second is eating something undigestible. So Rinpoche gave an example of, for instance, eating rocks. So this would be a cause for death if you ate something that your body couldn't process. Number 2. Number 3 is eating without having digested the previous meal. So this again is just eating. Once you've finished eating a meal, eating another right on top of it without fully digesting the one that you already ate, and then failing to expel undigested food that has accumulated in the stomach. So this is food stays in one's stomach and doesn't leave for some period of time. And if this happens, this becomes a cause for death. So if you're not able to get that out somehow, then this becomes a cause for death. And then the next one is intestinal obstruction. So if something's actually caught in the intestines, then that itself can cause death. I asked Rinpoche what was the difference between that and the one before it. And Rinpoche said that this was just the stomach has something in it, and this is specifically the intestines have something in them. So that was the answer. And not relying on specific medicines for specific illnesses. So you have to make sure that you're taking the right medicines that are meant for what you're trying to treat, because there are some medicines that, for instance, have an interaction. If you put them together, then they can actually become poisonous to you. You have to make sure that you have the specific medicine that is right for what your illness is, and is able to be taken with other medications that you have. So this is not relying on specific medicines for specific illnesses. So that's the meaning of that. Failing to understand the distinction between accustomed and unaccustomed activities. So I asked Rinpoche what this meant. It's something that you're familiar with having versus something that you aren't familiar with. And Rinpoche said, it's almost like eating something that you are not familiar with. So this can be a cause of untimely death. So you're familiar with what you can have, and you take that. But if you have something that's unfamiliar, this could be a cause for untimely death. So this is what this accustomed and unaccustomed activities. Untimely death, accidental death, is, for instance, maybe drowning, falling off a boat and drowning, or when just something that could happen outside accidentally that would cause you to die. So this is untimely death, accidental death, and engaging in sexual intercourse. And Rinpoche said that when you look at the commentary on this in Basu Chuji Jetsun's section, it states that this is referring to one's age. If one is at an age where it is harmful to have intercourse, and then one has intercourse, this can become a cause for death. So Rinpoche noted that about the final one about sexual intercourse in the commentary, saying it's referring to age. Diksun.
Mazamba sheba tege zubul nyogu yo na mena ko marwa. Mazamba sheba tege yenji meji pamugo marwa. Potan pamugaru mazamba sheba ina. Mazamba sheba tege zubul nyogu re mare. Hamp no hamp.
Lesa.
Marebe. What is antan wota.
Lesa.
Da gamble mazamba sheba tege nyogu re. Cheta mazamba sheba nyogu maris laba ina. Gamble mazamba sheba tege kande nyogu res.
So here, when we look at this last one, engaging in sexual intercourse, we have some doubts that arise about what it really means. So we have to say, someone has to ask themselves, if one is a woman, if I have sexual intercourse, will this be harmful to me? Is this something that's harmful? And then ask if someone is older, saying, what harm can be done by having engaging in this right now? Can it harm me? So is it harmful to someone who is older, or isn't it harmful? So all these questions come up, and doubts arise about this statement that's being made, and that's why there's the commentaries that state that this is what it means. But then when we look at the commentary, we also have to question it and then say, so what is the harm if someone is old? So we have to ask these questions and investigate it. So some texts state that sexual intercourse doesn't harm the body at all.
ni but chi center mu chi sen chi center magi sen gi sen loma de son sen son do da chi sen ne son les chi sen son le ne gi sen da de ba chowa gi sen da ba chowa magi sen da ba chowa loma de sen da de chowa son yo ro da chi sen son le gi sen da de ba chowa ne sa rang ha tan ba wa yin ji tan do ju ba yang rong de ba la su be ne gi chu do ji ra ba ju ba do sen la kun du shu ba wo sa gi san da de ba be che ta chi sen da la ra ba da cha wa ni lu chi sen ra ba da cha wa chi sen ra ba da cha wa ni de chi sen ra ba da be ji 당어서 우든가 누들도 베지 치세라바드 메로아 사초 메로 사이종와도 두 사이종종와 주종와도 양용도 치세라바드 레그마로아 치세라바 치세 참도 다 베지 치세 참도 다 되는 가르서 그래 자오마로마 자마 송서고 말বে 오마도 어디발이어서 말বে 로마도 자만이지 나고 예바도 예발이어서 그러다 대벽일에 더와도 바실로 와도 로장게 오만 디바잖아 오만 얼롱주고 말레스 어디서 그러다 서그러다
Rinpoche 카비아레
chi sen de la raba de chose chi sen da she de ro
chi sen raba
chi sen de raba de sara de she de ro chi sen de la raba de chawa ni chi sen raba de tang a su shin de le ne sa chu me lu wo tu du de je do sa chu la ti chu me la de mo no na she wo de du de le chi sen raba de me ro Tadil Gawa Yogo, Magi Mago Yogo. Tatana what Sacho, Chume, Manu, Monashil Tendula, Tene Ten Kalamba, Sumarva, Kalamba, and then Paman Tembi, Koa Cabin to the Maton, Nawa Kalamba Chamero, Malatembi, the men they had done with ne manhanda jimero hekal do de neto naton de mero te jogo to USA yong mar USA chowa USA do de ne chowa USA tonu jima de USA mar chowa USA de lansan gaba de lansan ba du jong ro sa mar ba chowa USA de shin de chowa yidile chowa shin de chai chesen chama de le loma tema do gawa de mago yo mares 치센 타말 로마데임 차 치센 라발라 고와다 마고와 로마데 송요아레스 치스 네 게사다데 비고네 쇼사데 치센 라발 고소레스 치센 라발 고소네 게사다데 비고초와 마기 치센 라발 고소 마기 사다데 비고초와 로마데 사다데 비초와 송 어디 치센 라발 고소레스 치센 참에 고소 네, 치세도 로마데임 차르스. 마고와도 고요 말레스.
So the mind at death, dying with a virtuous mind. So when we look at the mind at death, it can be divided into two categories: the coarse mind at death, and then the subtle mind at death. So the coarse mind at death is referring to that mind that goes through the process with the dissolution of the various elements, the fire, the water, the wind, the earth, and space. Sachu Melon. Earth, water, wind, fire, and space. So the dissolution of those elements and the mind at death. This is the coarse form. And the mind at death can be, the state of the mind at death can be divided into all three of those categories: virtuous, non-virtuous, and that which hasn't been presented in Scripture, or ethically neutral. So there are, it says, those who die with virtuous minds, whether through remembering on their own or through being reminded by others, turn their minds to virtues such as faith for as long as coarse discrimination, ordinary types of consciousness remains. In the case of death, for those who have cultivated either virtue or non-virtue unequally, they either remember on their own or reminded by others what they have become accustomed to do and repeatedly in the past, and this becomes extremely powerful. Their minds then become absorbed in this and forget all else. If they are equally familiar with not virtue and non-virtue, then they cannot stop remembering what they remember first and cannot engage their minds in anything else. So this is referring to that coarse-minded death. The subtle-minded death is referring to the mind that eventually is the most subtle mind of clear light, the death mind, the clear light mind at death, I guess one would say. So the clear light mind at death. So that it's stated that the mind rides on the wind, and that there are the central channel, and then there is a right and a left channel, and the Sa Uma, the long drogomarbe. Sa Uma, Sam.
Roma Germany didn't have one year to what Roma Germany could talk to debate this ten, Umano, no, Maris, so Marba. What the saturated melon thing, the Sandu John the thing would do, Sandu Shiro Mandro. Sandu she would do Umano, the Lord John would do the Chow says. So the
most subtle mind of clear light at death is the mind that is exposed when the knots that are not allowing the wind to go into the central channel. There are knots at the various chakra areas, here in this crown area and the throat area, in the stomach area and secret area, and there are knots, and if these knots are able to be undone, that are not allowing the air into the central channel, then at that point one can experience the mind of clear light. And if I've made any mistakes translating, I apologize. I just some of this vocabulary I don't have, so there are these. This is the distinction when it talks about the coarse consciousness and mind at death, and then the subtle mind at death. So the subtle mind at death is only in the category of that which hasn't been presented in Scripture or ethically neutral. So the subtle mind of clear light at death is neutral. It doesn't have virtue or non-virtue, whereas the coarse mind at death can be virtuous, non-virtuous, or ethically neutral. So this is the distinction between coarse and subtle, and I think that is it. That's it. Dixon.
당아서 사이 중앙에 출을 들려 안능아서 따가려서나 내버도 줍을 시간에 줍을 잡으면 가자는 건도아 잘르질는지 사출라 팀도 사이 내버냐 주인 내버 여러 거들래 사출라 팀스
오케이
사출라 팀도 사스나 안능아서 줍을 잡으는 저로 어디 내버냐 오면 사출라 팀스도 네 네발 어디 줍을 잡으면 가지 레벨을 잡으면 어디 사출라 팀바스 사출라 팀바스 어디가 시달래 네 네발 줍을 잡으면 가지 어디 내면로 초드물 팀어디 나가 시다 가려서나 아는 가서 하다 카드 주는 걸로 초드나요 초드 간데 로데 초드 밀리티비타레스 and the 칸은 나바 칸 초강스모나 Chud Military
Less so.
Chud Military Kadan Hatu Chudame Chasuna, Chud Militimas, Tamme, Luna Tibita Karizana, and the Zubul Tabu.
Less so.
What they call the Nebel Zubul Tomachasuna,
Less so.
what they met the Luna Tibita Menroa.
Less so.
Zubul Tomachasuna, Zubul Sabut Nyasuna, Me. Lula Timitaris.
Less so.
Then the Lunda Nashila Timitakarisna, and I to cut down to the Ulu mother, Uban Road, what the chief Luna, Lunda Nashila Timitaris.
The Uka.
Udama, but Uchism.
Okay, Che. Okay, finish.
Umeba Chasuna.
Okay.
No, Nashila Timbas.
Well, no, I'm Sheila Chenmo. Oh, okay. Mental practice.
Uchin things are Mazu, Patan, Sedan, Chin du Londe, Nashil Tinin, but
Okay. So the way the elements dissolve and what effect they have is as follows. So the earth element dissolves into the water element. So the earth element is responsible for the body's rigidity. And when this dissolution takes place, the body becomes very loose and not rigid. It loses its ability to have any kind of posture. So it loses its ability to be rigid once the earth element dissolves into the water element. The next part of our dissolution is that the water element then dissolves into the fire element. So once we have this water element dissolve, then at that point we are very dry. So our mouths become very dry, and our body inside begins to become drier. So this is what happens when the water dissolves into the fire. The next thing that happens is the fire dissolves into the wind. And the fire element is responsible for the warmth of our body. So once this fire element dissolves into the wind element, then we become cold. We no longer have that internal warmth. So this is what happens at this step. And then the next step is that the wind element dissolves into the mental consciousness itself. So when the actual breathing ceases, the actual breathing in and out that someone is doing ceases, at that time then the wind element has dissolved into the mental consciousness. So this is the order in which the elements dissolve. The earth dissolves into the water dissolves into the fire dissolves into the wind dissolves into the mental consciousness itself. And that's the dissolution of the elements. Less so.
What the so goes so Gawada Magi say you go the Chisen Rabba in Chisen Rabba, Satulatin, Chumalatin, Monolatin, Monashilatin, Nashi Nawalatin. What the so goes so Chisen Rabba is the so goes so Gawa you are, Magawa you are, Lomatin Sensunga you are.
Less so.
Gai sent on the Bichawatala and then Chisen Gawa. Magi sent on the Bichawal Chisen Magawa. And the Lomata what the Sunga you are is.
Less so. So the course at the time of death, when we look at what the course consciousness is doing at the time of death, we find the dissolution of the earth element into the water element, and the water element into the fire element, and the fire element into the wind element, and then the wind element dissolving into the mental consciousness itself. So there are coarse and subtle states during this the mind. There are coarse and subtle states that the mind at death experiences, and this is the coarse state that it experiences. You need something you did. Kashik Jason, Gary Jason.
Talon Nashil things are doing, Tom Kalamba, the Chiba Malamba, Long Nashil things are doing, Long the Gas are doing, the Nazo Pamani Kuta, the Pai Kuta, the Vigi, Shu Sakuno Lumendua, Sakuno Chaka. Maltebi Koa de Tawata Sakuno Lula, Maltebi Koa de Mendua. Shul Tempi Pai. Zakuno le pai ko de omanama le ondu tama kalambas jalan da jitawa jimeno neba kunula tama kalamba mal tebi tene atondu cheba malambas malanda jitawa jimeno kuni jikal do sundu ondu netos na tonga de jimeno na tonga netoche ti odel choice de lewo ta choice So
the subtle mind of clear light at death is necessarily that which hasn't been presented in Scripture, whereas the coarse mind at death that experiences the dissolution of those elements can be found to be virtuous, non-virtuous, and then that which hasn't been presented in Scripture or ethically neutral. And then there's a part that I'm missing. Rinpoche is explaining the process that takes place at the dying process at a subtle level, and I'm missing some vocabulary that I'm just not going to be able to just pull out. So I apologize for that, but Rinpoche is explaining how this dissolution takes place, and then the mental consciousness itself is left, and if it is present within the central channel, then it is the mind of clear light at that point.
Shabu Juju Tani should not attend the can do it. The choice is Chamudre Rabadins. Tobadua. Leader Mujo, what the Shabu Juju but Shubra. Nobody choice. And the Uches are doing Shabu Juju but what the Zubs Habit in Devo. That's what the Nyabaja, Nyabat were there. Nyabaja goes Chawara because Jabare. So
then we can have doubts because various lamas have been present after they have been pronounced dead, seemingly present after they have been pronounced dead. For instance, Ling Rinpoche was still found to be warm and abiding in some kind of state for 14 days. Shabu Juji for 14 days. So would this be the coarse mind at death that he's experiencing, or the subtle mind at death that is being experienced at that point? Because Rinpoche said there's still, what the science found is that there was still heat, still warmth. So that means that there is still a coarse, potentially, because the elements are at a coarse level, a coarse mind at death present. So it's a doubt that arises when we look at these examples that seem to contradict or require more investigation in order to understand how they compare to each other. So there are many positions that are taken on the Nyapa Jakins. So there are many examples of those who have been able to stay in this state after death. in Kashi Nishu. There was also one person who stayed Nishu Sajie, 21 Nishu Sachi, 21 days. So there's previously a master who stayed 21 days in that state. They don't breathe. But the body itself is still warm. There's no cold. So there's still that mind at death is present. Mind at the time of death is present for them. So for us, we are able to, at the time of death, when this earth is dissolving into the water, and the water is dissolving into the fire, and the fire is dissolving into the wind, and the wind is dissolving into the mental consciousness. During this time, we're able to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment or bodhicitta, and think about emptiness, and also going for refuge. And by doing this, at the time of death, while we are dying, if our mind is doing this, then we'll be able to quickly be reborn into the what the suit has a genre, what the saturatin, the maturatin lay on do, what that the lays on some much in the Gawal San Chatu Sand, the John Lutan, what the San down to Waina, the lapsa, what the geese and they were going to show the waters, the religion was. So then this, if we're able to generate these things in our mind, think about emptiness and bodhicitta, and going for refuge, then we'll be able to quickly, because this is a virtuous mind at death, we'll be able to be quickly born into the higher realms of cyclic existence. So when we get to this section, dying with a virtuous mind, Jayan Sheba states that there are 5 categories. Okay, so we're going to take a short break and have snack. Sorry. I may have Tylenol on the cargo. Okay, thank you. Dixon. Okay, so we're on page 307, and it's the mind at death that we're dealing with. And it's dying with a virtuous mind. And Jayan Sheba's commentary states that there are 6 categories in this section. Tamunga. Oh, there are 5. I apologize. 5 categories.
Rangi Tamba, Jenji Tendo Juba, Ronte, Tebala Subiki, Dushi Rabanjun Bato, Saint Lacun Shuba Wosa. Tasuzu Hama Gawaji, Abashasaya, Chubambia, Gunjaya, Shanchu Sanguya, what the Gawakari Baina, what they go to the Atene, when the Susu Santan Tantun Tagare, Tamatuna, Jeda Gochu San, Gawat San Tangore, Jandru San Tangore, Shanchu Santan, what the Lavaina, what to call Gawat to John Wazerwa. They go there, what the Chesan Rabba goes to Gaze and they were going to Shesuna, Gaze and Dembe, Gaze and Debe. Gaze and they were going to show on the Rangi Tamba, Jenji, Tend to Juba and Rontes. Tebala Subi, Conjula Tebala Subi, Dushi Rabanjo Padosa, Chesen Rapa Injero, Chen Rapa. Sen La Gundu Shoba, so the Tambure, Dung Dang Tambu, Nang Dang Tambut.
Tambo Kabaka.
Tambute, Gaysanda de Bichoane, Rangi Tamba, Jenji Tent to Chuba Yang, Ronte, Tebala Subeki, Chu, Dushi Rabanju, Pato, Senla, Gundu Shoba, was what about it. Nagadan Tambutre. Jaji Nagadan Tambo, Tel Saji Tambutidua. What the Kuzumalu, and the ancient Tulchilu, and the Jana.
Then in Kabaka.
How God what the Gays and La Kundushoba was what about the
Oh, okay.
Gays and the Becho and the Rangi Temba, Change Tent to Chuba Yang Ronte, Tebala Subichu, Dushi Rabanjo, Bato, Sala Kundushoba was not an hometer.
Okay, Dushi.
The ancient Tulkus 10.
So, okay. Those who die with virtuous minds, whether through remembering on their own or through being reminded by others, turn their minds to virtues such as faith, for as long as coarse discrimination remains. So this is the first category. So this is referring to that coarse type of mind at death. And here it's speaking of a virtuous mind. So previously we engaged in prostrations. We paid homage to the three jewels. We went for refuge. We made offerings. We generated the mind that aspires to enlightenment. We thought about emptiness. By doing these things, we generated virtue. So by recalling on our own these things that we previously became familiarized, we're able to abide in a virtuous state of mind because of our previous familiarity with it. And then it says, on their own or through being reminded by others. If one isn't able to on their own, because of previous familiarization, recall these virtuous things in order to have a virtuous mind at death, then he or she can be helped by someone else and reminded, oh, you should do this, you should go for refuge, you should generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, you should make offerings, etc., etc. So this is the first category, which deals with dying with a virtuous mind, and this through remembering is remembering the previous virtue that you engaged in. So that's what one is remembering. That's the first.
And Hong Lam Montu, Combra Shebate, Chi Dudon Temba, Jutesa, Saint-La, Yu Jena, and Jo and Jola Jena, Jeban Jorosa. Taki, Gawada Magawa, Hama Sasha Batuzo, Nijendaki, Tachuru Hamagawan Sayurda, and what is Susitana and Dramadena, Nijenda should go out to South Santan Waters. And the Kaji Ashika Lama to Dibasaya Matendlokan and Menroa, Ranga Temba, Yang Tent Shuba. Shejan, Temba Shejan Rontes, Huang Lam Montu Combra Sheba Tes, Diba Mobile Koyona, Go Mobile Koyobayena, what the Tocha led him Grace. Combra Shebate, Chi Toto Demba, Jutesa, 공부시 쳐와대 저부 너무 미운 그래서 대sen들라 조라 젠 제반주로사 어때 그것도 줘봐이나 그것도 줘봐도 뭐 줘봐이나 젠다 생각 젠다 그거 젠르레스
네 니바
니바로
Okay.
어때 니바래
Okay. The Kanga Niba.
어때 니 강가 니바로 그거도 먹었어.
So here, then now we get into number 2 in the 5 categories. In the case of death, for those who have cultivated either virtue or non-virtue unequally, they either remember on their own or are reminded by others what they have become accustomed to do repeatedly in the past, and this becomes extremely powerful. So here, this is either virtuous or non-virtuous, and this is if one can remember on his or her own the previous positive things that were done. If there were positive, virtuous things done, then one is able to have a virtuous mind at death. Or if maybe someone could remind you to sway your mind in that direction towards virtue. But then there's also the potential for non-virtue. And it says what they have become accustomed to repeatedly in the past. So what has been repeatedly familiarized? What has been repeatedly familiarized with? If one thinks about it on one from one's own side, if it is virtuous, then one will have this virtuous mind. But if it's a non-virtuous that one is more familiar with, then one will have a non-virtuous mind at the time of death. So this is either remembering oneself, remembering these things, or having someone help you remember them. So this is first category is dying with virtuous mind. The second category gets into virtuous and non-virtuous.
Yeah, that's Somba niga la somba kona ne tambu kantamba tele duba manjute sentient manju ko sa ta gawa da magawa niga la komba nyam radio na gawa sa na diba sa double radio na and tambu ka transmona wate jab de me ungre sa kantamba tele duba manjute ne sentient manju ko sa Tamu can't temper the Watungo June, Tin Debut Mingres. Gawashiba Tamu Tayana, Gain Debut Mingre, Debashiba Tamu Tayana, Debi Debut Mingres, the legend Manjukos, or whatever to Sumbare.
So their minds then become absorbed in this and forget all else. So that's just the tail end of that last one, which was number 2. Then number 3, if they are equally familiar with both virtue and non-virtue, then they cannot stop remembering what they remembered first and cannot engage their minds in anything else. So here this is whatever comes first at the time of death, because there's this equal familiarization with virtue and non-virtue. Whatever comes up first is what the mind stays at the time of death, because then it becomes fixated on that one thing and can't really think of something new, can't really have any kind of new experience or new input. So this is what the third category deals with, that if you have this equal non-virtue and virtue, whatever thought comes up first. If it's misdeed, then it's non-virtue. If it's virtue, then positive, then it will be virtue. So this is what is meant by number 3. Okay, take so.
That's number what the Goate Madamada do the Jaja Biko Madamada Sakatu Sajis Digdua. That Jeba Gawa Shebane Sheba Gawash against Shawat cheese and Tama Karyungres, what Tama Shigdua, Gawashaba Chawane, Merchune, Naman Roa Tan, Jalasa, Chi Dunatala, Malantabu, Zu Maduba Mayba Yidua, Tatu Juatan, Dawachawan Jute, Chikati Lula, Dunga Tua, Trabamanungo, so the Deba de Jibarendua. Gisana de Michawate, Kurungan Hamal Kariasana, Nakun and Pa Yamashas the Balpa, Ruderman Hawach Agres, Mertrine, Haman dance, Mertres and Nakuna Jar, and then Yamayas at the Balpandro, Roatan Jala, Kusen Hawata Jervota. Chi Duna, Gisana de Gisana de Shibaina, Chi Duna, Talamalanta, Zumaduba, Zumaduba Maimba, Zu Yidu Mokun Haudegres, Zu Yidu Tatu Juma Dansa, Tatu Juma Dan, and the Wachavan Jute, the Wasandel Padan with the Jimichi Dua, the Wachavan Jutes. And Chibujin Chenrezig, Chekati Lula, Dunga Tua, Trabamanyu, Shekalamatu, Zubule, Dunga Trabio Mares, what about the Jibare?
So then number 5, those who have cultivated virtue seem to pass from darkness into light. As they die, various pleasant and attractive images appear as though in a dream. They die comfortably, and at the point of death, intense feelings of suffering do not arise in their body. Here, this is number 4. It says, those who have cultivated virtue seem to pass from darkness into light. As they die, various pleasant and attractive images appear as though in a dream. So it's when someone's dying and they have this virtuous mind at the time of death, it starts out in a very, very dark, you start out and everything is very, very dark, and then you slowly, everything becomes much lighter, and to the point of where it's very light, and then everything you see is pleasant. Everything you see has an attractiveness to it, and there isn't any kind of discomfort that happens during that type of dying process because of the mind at the time of death.
Ngaba tenrendo ngaba le sheba na jene na ju shinto chochwa yinus gawa jene shin ga zu ngalo shega lamo ne dungen ma dungen chebu yo maras na ju shinto chochwa yinus dungen chuchung res dungen chebu yo maras what about ngaba reta.
So number 5 is, for those who are currently doing what is right, the final agony of death is minimal. Rinpoche. Enjoy, right?
Ngaba le sheba na jene na ju shinto cho chungwa yino so what ngaba renwa. Shekalam dunga chujung res ta dunga chebu yo ma res yong ma res.
In a su.
God ge said that they were going to.
Oh, okay. So Tuchena. So those who are currently doing what is right. I asked Rinpoche what that means. So doing what is right is those who are dying with a virtuous mind. So those beings who are dying with a virtuous mind are those who are doing what is right. So at that time they're doing what is right, because you want a virtuous mind at the time of death. and the final agony of death is minimal. So for those people who are dying with a virtuous mind, there isn't very much pain, there isn't very much agony when you die. So that's it. Decent, Rinpoche. So those are the 5 categories that explain this one category of dying with a virtuous mind. So we can look at these virtuous minds and understand them by just knowing and looking at the outline. This virtuous mind section by knowing and understanding the outline. So now we've arrived at non-virtuous mind, and the section on non-virtuous mind can be divided into 6 categories according to Jayan Sheva.
Geshe Lharampa ju patun jongshin chikati lula dungen ji tsua trabu nyungwa tang wo deba tambari tambo wo deba tere magi senda debi chewa na rangi tenpa hong ane kama churu diba sa susu kama diba sa bat ten ane jenda ki shu diba kama diba tu sa ya varis laba ina ane ten tu Zhang Rongde, Chasuji Magawa, Tremba Nan, Geshe Lharampa, Chesen Lharampa Gausin Jirwa, Geshe Lharampa Ju Patun Jongshin, Chesen Chama Gausu Loma Dematu, Magi Senyo Marwa, Patun Jongshin, Chikati Lula, Dungen Jitsua, Trapu Nyuata, Dungen Shichibu Waris, whatever Tambre.
So dying with a non-virtuous mind. Those who die with non-virtuous minds, whether through remembering on their own or through being reminded by others, remember non-virtue, such as attachment, for as long as coarse discrimination remains. At the point of death, they experience intense physical pain. When those who... Intense physical pain. That's the first one among the 6.
Magi senda de ko chiwa saji tu non tambu je
that's it
ta wode tani ba denere trabu nywa tang wode yeche de tambu je te baru de tomba ja ko kanda ji do de tomba mo do magi le she ba chi tsana sa diba sa ja gende Diba sakin magawa sakin chi tse magawa nga shepi leji debun khati na de nyong de sa magi senji shengen zukunga lo nga sabi magawa sabi ne leg khati zukunga de ne sen le yong res khati na de nyong de sa mala jindu zo maduba toman hawan jo de sa Monaji do Kurul Hawale, Zuma Duba Mobo, Hangres, Hawane, Merchant Road up, Yamashasane, Nahun was Zurigan, what Derigan Hawan Gres, what the Nibare, Tamut Rabadua.
When those who are currently cultivating non-virtue die, they experience signs foretelling the effects of the non-virtue that they have engaged in. As if in a nightmare, many unpleasant images appear to them. They pass from light to darkness. So here, this is very similar to the previous one, where instead of going from darkness into light, they pass from light into darkness. So this is for someone who has a non-virtuous mind. And it says the signs are that they experience signs foretelling the effects of the non-virtue they have engaged in. So they have these almost nightmares and visions of these non-virtuous things that cause them to abide in the non-virtuous state because of this previously kind of familiarity. So this is the next one, and then dying with a non-virtuous mind.
Deba magawa sumba tere magawa chimba sheba na nes sumba tere sumba magawa chimba sheba na nesa tsama maduba tongwe ane hawan ramara doja tene mabu tongne ane ko wate ne lule dongen yungres lule dongen jongshin pezin sheshawa sheba dans wate ngasu babu yalan ramata shina chibu yungmendo a Pezin Shebatan, Kala Yuatan, Shakalam de Laba Kamba Yuan, the Kusan Le Shinan Dule, Luguatan, Kala Yuatan, Shanji Juan, Tuba Shuada, Jimba Shuanamatan, called the Henchim Dulce Wazero. Then Nakala Nubas on the Jerota, me Duba, meet and drummer over the Dubatan. Kan oa jungatas kan boa marba boa terkasa
breathing
yedero goa jungata ne tendra na jungo sa wate magwa chibu sheken to go wate chikalam to wate tendre yungure sa ta
so now we get to the sumba
tam sumba
so this is now number 3. So it's going to talk about those who have committed extremely bad non-virtues. So they pass from light to darkness. So this begins number 3. When those who have committed serious non-virtuous actions observe these unpleasant signs, they experience physical pain and their hair stands on end. They shake their hands and feet, avoid urine and excrement, reach up toward the sky, roll their eyes back, drool, and more. So here this is saying, for those who have committed a very bad non-virtue, and they have these signs that were previously mentioned that are like visions, like a nightmare, while they're passing into this darkness. So then they have this experience of a physical pain, and all of the hairs on their body stand up, and then it says that they shake their hands and feet and actually defecate on themselves, urinate on themselves, and this is these are all signs of that the non-virtue is present. It says they reach up toward the sky, roll their eyes back, drool, and more. Dean.
What about Resme? Sumbaro Suba, what about the Deba Mago, Chimusagan, Zulawate, no Damra Duja Mumu, that Jeba del Tiba, Mago and Dean Sagan Zule, and then no Chimusagan, you want on the Kashi, what some of you mares. Get the what the Jebatre, get the Mago and Dean Sheba Yina. Tadale Kaji Junlasa, Deba Magoa Sabi, ne Shindigan Tele, Shetan Junga, Tenalul, Samayumar, Kaji Mures, Kaji Junlas, Kaji Majunwi, Zuba Majungosa, Deba Chibusagan de Luma Najite, Sama Tendinsagan Lumares, Zuba Majungos. What is Jiba?
The Dean Saki.
Jiba Manungos.
Okay.
Le Neba Sheba Nala 나주 신도 터치우스 what 지바레
So now they're speaking of medium non-virtue, Lama Tsongkhapa is. If they have been moderate, if they have been moderate in their non-virtue, then not all these things will happen. Some will and some will not. Wrongdoers suffer terrible agony at the moment of death, such as agony is found everywhere that beings are born, except among deities and hell beings. So if there's medium amount of non-virtue, then not all of the sequence of things will happen necessarily. But there will be a suffering. No matter what, though, wherever one is born, it says even except for such places, it says except for deities and hell beings. Rimche, garshaning elwapa. The don't gare nika. The elwapa dong. The hla.
What ngaba.
Okay.
Ngabare najune hada nyawa matubi jine thajela yodos. Najune hada nyawa matubi jine thajela yodos.
Okay, so number 4 deals with the medium non-virtue and ends, if we're looking at the outline, where it says some will and some will not. And then number 5 starts here. Wrongdoers suffer terrible agony at the moment of death. Such agony is found everywhere that beings are born, except among deities and hell beings. So that sentence is number 5.
Nyabala najue mesana diba cheba sagan de najue mombe shede duda. What the ngata tubasar wata nga tubasana lari sama lubai no lari what the seji mata na lari din da sama lubai sama mandu de good mandu.
Ale.
And change it out nga mombe change it out no lu mandu.
Lessa.
And the sugar nasan tado te samarita. And then not just that doing a marve. Not june, Satanya Matuba, Jinet Hajila Yotos, Satanya Matuba someone do, and then not you chiwa nyawa batan, the watchwal had Matubi, and Edatan Tundutan, Matajila, not you to yours, not you. Chi doing, guy doing, I doing, chi doing it, Dalio, to do your Malioro. Nyaba, not you chishu dangerota. Not you chishu hata, Nyabata, ne Dewachishu Hani Matubi, ne Chine Yedata, Tunduta, Matajila Yodos. What this land goes at it.
Then Khensur the Dewa Chishu, Dungyal Cheshu.
That doing chishu again the
Nyawapa, Dewa
Chishu. Chishu again the Nyawabaje, the Wachi will ha. Hada, Nyawaba Matuba, Nyawaba, the Hamatuba, Janet Hajila Yotos, what those Kuala goes at somebody.
Then the Garshan, the
Nyawabala Naju Mesala, Nuzena, Tago Kenajua. Nyawabala Naju Menatawudle. Nyabal Nyan Jenagant was the Debachable Sagan to Marva.
Less
and Naju Chishu doing Chishu down
Lessa
with the Naju Mess and the Jigamudua.
Lessa
And Naju Chishu the Nyan Batan, the Wachishu, Hani Matubi, and the Yedata to Ruta Matsamalea, what the Naju de Yoris.
Lessa.
You the Chiganashi doing Melu to Rulu Edal Ubs.
Lessa.
What the shade is at it.
Okay. So then, number 5, such agony is found everywhere that beings are born, except among deities and hell beings. So this statement Rinpoche said, made him really have doubts and not understand why this would be made, that if the hell beings are abiding in the greatest amount of suffering, and it takes the greatest amount of non-virtue in order to create the hell beings, in order to create that state of existence. So it says, wrongdoers suffer terrible agony at the moment of death. Such agony is found everywhere that beings are born. And then it says, except here and here. And Rinpoche is saying that perhaps, Rinpoche is saying that they have the greatest amount of happiness in the deity realm, and the greatest amount of suffering in the hell realm. You would think that in the hell realm, that because it is the greatest amount of non-virtue, that the non-virtuous mind, the greatest non-virtuous mind would have to have been present in order to create this hell realm rebirth. So there must be a wrongdoer that has to suffer terrible agony at the moment of death. So Rinpoche said he looked in all of the different Lamrims and commentaries to try to find some clarification of why this statement is made, that it says that there's an exception made for deities and hell beings. And it seems like hell beings definitely would have this terrible agony at the moment of death. The Rinpoche, the Ngel Wapa?
Nyamba ta de chishu mar na ju chishu ro.
Lesso.
Na ju chishu nyamba ta de wa chishu lani ma to bi e da to ta me chama le ya na ju yo res. O del tezla na an de do ma to nyamba la na ju mes la ba ina. An ta ma la ma nyamba na ju chu yo. Ma go chu sa ga na ju chu yo ba shi do. Ta wo gen do.
So Rinpoche is saying, if you look at it like that, the hell beings are already experiencing the greatest amount of suffering and agony at that moment, at all times anyway, then this statement would be okay. Because if you're looking at it like that, then it makes sense that the gods don't experience suffering whatsoever, and the hell being don't experience. The gods don't have the ability to experience this agony that's shown here, and the hell beings are already always experiencing agony. So there wouldn't be this separate kind of agony that there would be for others. So that's another way that you could look at it. And then number 6.
Drupa Tanji Jang Chi Lushi Musewala Mali Jubato Yun Rinpoche Gombi Dala Chaban Jungo Savati Drupa Derendua Ta Shikin Tamal Wate Yun Rinpoche Gombi Susul Chaba Yungres Chaba Dala Chaba Ota Nga Mebarendu Nyabe Dala Chaba Yungres
So number 6 is dealing with the attachment one has to the I, the attachment that one has to the self. At the time of death, whereupon discrimination will become unclear, beings are attached to the self with which they have long time been familiar. So one suddenly has this attachment to oneself and says, "I'm going to die," and then one goes into the intermediate state that after this thought, and then a series of things that happen.
Chikalama to Kuchin, Rabbi Gozo, Gis and what you suna, Deba Chiba in a dental generosity. Who Divi Deba Milmaris, Milgin Deba Milmaris.
So if someone though has this at the time of death, this non-virtuous mind, and then they're encouraged by others to have a virtuous mind and to remember things that are virtuous, then there can be a transformation and a change that takes place for that person, and then they can be born into the higher realms of cyclic existence when they die because of that virtuous state of mind that they were encouraged to have. But then the same is true for those who have a virtuous mind. Hopefully I said before, those who have a non-virtuous mind but then are encouraged to be virtuous can go to the higher realms. Likewise, those who have a virtuous mind but are encouraged to engage in misdeeds and encouraged to think of things that are non-virtuous could also be changed and then be born into the lower realms of cyclic existence, the 3 lower realms of cyclic existence, by that negative encouragement. So the same is true, positive and negative kind of influence at the time of death. So it's very important that at the time of death we have the method to cultivate a virtuous mind.
So
today's Mother's Day, so we should make very good aspirations for our mothers and make good dedication for our mothers. All of our mothers have been so kind. We should make very good aspiration for them. Okay, so I guess we will end right here. So we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate the virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Lobsang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, sustain till samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Rinpoche, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance.